What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name is Kevin, and we're going to go over a bunch of deck lists that you can try out in this new Archasia's Island format that have been doing well in opening weekend. So huge shout out to inkdecks.com, all the tournament organizers, and these players for sharing their deck lists online. We have some tournament results from the first weekend, so we have a bunch of different decks to go over. I know a lot of people are definitely feeling like it's a doomer tier 0 format with Sapphire Steel or Sapphire Ruby taking the #1 spot, but we have a lot of results to go over that are not those decks. So I want to start off with this Amber Steel Mufasa deck from the Refined Gaming Case tournament. Shout out you guys, and shout out Calvin for getting second place with this Amber Steel Mufasa deck. As you can see, we're only playing Strength of a Raging Fire as our only action, and everything else is characters. So on the early game, you want to start off with Daisy Duck, maybe to start questing for 2. You also have some options of Captain Hook to control the early game, or the new Mulan Disguise Soldier, which will let you draw and discard a card. Maybe you got to discard some of those uninkables from your hand. We've seen Steel Faucet decks play Cinderella and Storm Rage on before, but it looks like Calvin decided to not take that route. It looks a little bit more of an aggressive route because we are playing Smees, Lilos, and Piglets that can quest for 2 or more. We also have Doc as a turn 3 play. This will let you quest and lower the cost of the next character you play the following turn. So on turn 3, you can play Doc. On turn 4, you can quest with Doc and start playing your 5-cost characters like Mufasa, Beast Tragic Hero, or the new Bagheera, a legendary steel card that came out in Archasia's Island. This is a 5-cost character with 4 strength, 3 willpower. He quests for 2, has bodyguard, and during the opponent's turn, whenever he's banished, you'll deal 2 damage to every opposing character. Kind of like a grab your swords mechanic built into the card, but because it has bodyguard, it's going to be protecting your 2 questers that we were just talking about. And if you don't open up with Doc, you still have some good lines of Lawrence into Gontu, or maybe Pete into Rapunzel, and even 1 copy of Tinkerbell the Generous Fairy. This is an Amber 4-cost character that when you play it, will let you look at the top 4 cards of your deck and pick any character to keep to your hand, and more than likely you're gonna hit off of this card because you're only playing 4 non-characters in the entire deck, and you're also playing Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, which, don't forget, this is a great shift target for your Tinkerbell Giant Fairy as well. Off of the Mufasa, you have some awesome hits like Perdita, Tinkerbell, maybe even a Gontu or a Bagheera. So in my opinion, I think Mufasa Steel might be one of the ways to go about your Amber Steel strategy. And in first place of that same Refined Gaming Case tournament, we have Matt, who placed first with Ruby Sapphire. Yes, Sapphire being one of the most dominant colors in the meta. You're going to see a lot of blue at your local game store and in this video. Blue-Red, Sapphire Ruby, been one of the best decks since last format. And as you can tell, we're not playing too many new cards in here outside of Sapphire Coil, which is going to lower the strength of the opposing characters by 2 anytime you ink, and that's pretty good in a deck like Sapphire, which will let you ink more than once per turn. Some more new cards in here to make the deck a little more powerful. We see Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam. We've seen this card in action now. This will let you grab back some items from your discard pile like Popsicle, Vitalisphere on turn 6. Possibly even on turns 4 and 5, because you can ramp into this card. 1 copy of Scrooge McDuck, which will let you fetch items from the top of your deck as well. We're not seeing the new Belle, Apprentice Inventor, in this list, and we're also not seeing any Maui Half Sharks in this list, right? And no Lucky Dime. So it's looking like a different type of strategy. No burn mechanic in here. It's just straight red-blue items, and we're taking advantage of our big Tamato, but there's only 1 copy in this deck. Let me know what you guys think of this deck list. I think it's a different take on red-blue from what I'm used to seeing. We also have McDuck Manor, which is another way for you to generate some lore as you go. But really, I think what you're trying to do is just constantly control the game, because you're playing 4 copies of Sisu, the empowered sibling, with the Sapphire Coil. So you're going to be able to ink multiple times, lower the strength of multiple opposing characters, play this big Sisu, and then all the opposing characters are going to go away, right? 2 copies of Pirate's Life to make sure we don't get outpaced. So in case our opponent is going too fast with some of those aggro Amber Steel decks, you can always play Pirate's Life to reduce their lore and gain your lore back. I like the 2 copies of Cusco in this list. The Selfish Emperor, a Sapphire character that hasn't really been seeing a lot of play. I think a lot of people were opting to play something like Hideaway instead, but pretty much this is going to give you the ability to pick a location or item on the board and put it into the inkwell. So if your opponent has a Lucky Dime, or if they have a McDuck Manor, you can play this Cusco, get it off of the board, and make sure it does not hit the discard pile. So one of the big things right now with this Sapphire item engine is that you're able to grab your items back from the discard pile, but cards like Cusco, cards like Hideaway will make sure that cannot happen, as opposed to cards like Benja or Rise of the Titans, which will banish items and send them to the discard pile, you can use Cusco, put them into the opposing inkwell, and now your opponent will no longer have access to that item for the rest of the game, more than likely. I was curious to know how this strategy would go when we replace Ice Block with Sapphire Coil, because Ice Block is a much better card on curve. It's a 1 cost, but Ice Block being uninkable made it very hard to play, so I think you could just play 4 Sapphire Coil and call it a day, in my opinion. And in third place of this Refined Gaming Archazia Island Case tournament, we do have a Sapphire Steel deck. I think Sapphire Steel, like we've been talking about, is going to be one of the most represented decks of the meta. A lot of people are playing it in a variety of ways. I like this list. It's playing some cards I haven't really seen people play before. We're playing the Aerial Treasure Collector. This card can let you quest for 5 if you have the most items on board, and if you combine it with Lucky Dime, you can gain 10 lore in 1 turn. We're also playing 2 copies of 1 Jump Ahead. This means if you start your turn 1 with Popsicle into Belle, the Apprentice Inventor, on turn 2 you can already start ramping by singing 1 Jump Ahead. So there's a world where on turn 2 you sing 1 Jump Ahead, play Sail, or play Tipo as well, so you're able to start ramping twice as fast in the early game. There's not that many characters in this deck. Most of this deck is actions and items from which you can see. But we have some pretty heavy draw power. We have Flavorsham, Popsicle, Fortisphere, even 4 copies of Beast, Tragic Hero. The Tamatoa Happy as a Clam is going to grab back our Popsicles and Fortispheres from the discard pile. So if you're ever slowing down in the game, just having this 1 Tamatoa will grab back your draw engine from the discard. And as the game progresses, the later the game gets, you're going to have a big advantage, because the moment you drop Tamatoa So Shiny, you're going to be able to probably secure the game with the amount of items you have thanks to Lucky Dime. And you're playing 2 Lucky Dime, so if it does get Cusco'd or Hideaway, you're going to have more in your deck. There's a lot of ways you can play Sapphire Steel this format. Here's another list. We have the top 4 from this event, a blue steel, what they call the Kiwi aggro list. This is more of a tempo style blue steel deck. As you can see in this list, we're playing no ramp cards, so we don't have any Tipo, any Sail, no 1 Jump Ahead. We're strictly just playing characters from turns 1 through 7 is what it feels like. On turn 1, you want to play Mickey Mouse, maybe the Belle, Apprentice Inventor. This 3-cost Belle you can play on turn 1 if you have an item on board. So turn 1 you can go Popsicle into Belle, or Popsicle, and then turn 2 you start playing Docs, Calhouns, maybe even Smeeze. You obviously don't want to play Doc on turn 2 unless you can draw more cards, but if you don't have any other 2-cost character, why not, right? You can follow that up by playing an Alice Savvy Sailor, which will let you quest for 2. Give one of your characters ward as well, so on the turn 4 play, you can play something like Flavorsham, Pluto, Bodyguard, and give them ward. This deck feels pretty aggressive. You start questing for 2 pretty early on, and you're constantly adding more and more pressure to the board as turns go on, especially by turn 5, because you're able to play something like Cogsworth, which is going to really be strong against these Sapphire Steel mirror matches. I really like Cogsworth in this meta. Steel is very popular, whether you're playing Emerald Steel, Purple Steel, Sapphire Steel, and Cogsworth is just going to give you a big advantage, especially in the mirror matches. And while your opponent is spending their turns trying to ramp with cards like Tipo, Sail, maybe they're trying to set up their fancy plays of Oswald and Sapphire Coil, you're just playing characters back to back to back. You're playing Pete's to stop them from playing actions, John Silver's from stopping them from challenging, and McDuck Manors to make sure you can keep gaining lore. The combination of McDuck Manor and John Silver seems a little disrespectful. What's cool too is that this deck is not playing Oswald. It's only playing 1 copy of Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, and pretty much every other card in this deck is either a rarity rare or lower. There's only 1 legendary, and it's Tamatoa Happy as a Clam. So in my opinion, this is kind of a budget deck. The most expensive card here is going to be the Tamatoa and the Strength of a Raging Fire. Strength of a Raging Fire is kind of mandatory in this meta, I think. It's one of the best steel removal cards you have, but for the most part, a lot of the other cards are pretty low rarity. Calhouns are only rares, Docs are rares, and these are about like $8 to $10 each. So outside of that, you're probably spending way less on this deck compared to some of the other average Sapphire Steel builds that you see around. This was a 47-player tournament from what the data shows, so we have a variety of deck lists, and it's pretty cool to see that with so many players, there's a bunch of different decks in top 8. It's not just all Sapphire Steel. So shout out Jesse for getting top 8 at this tournament with Amber Steel as well. Amber Steel Song, it's just a different way to play Amber Steel Song in my opinion. We're playing some new cards like Penny. This is an Amber Steel Dual Ink character. When you play this character, remove up to 2 damage from chosen character, and that character gains resist. This Penny will let you quest for 2 as well, which is really strong. So there's some pretty cool plays where you can give resist to your Daisy Duck, or even give it to your Robin Hood or Cinderella and start questing early. Maybe you want to also use this in combination with your Aurora Dream Guardian. Maybe you want to use this card in combination with your new Aurora Waking Beauty. This is a new legendary from Arcasia's Island that is a Singer 5. Probably want to play this instead of something like Gaston because it has that extra effect. Gaston is a little better, though, in my opinion, because it avoids Brawl. However, this character has the extra ability when you remove 1 or more damage, you can re-ready this character. So she can challenge twice, she can sing twice potentially, she can quest, ready, and then sing. So you could do some interesting plays there. They're also playing the Troubadour, another Amber Steel, a Singer character. It's a 2 cost, 1 strength, 3 willpower that has resist +1 and is a Singer 4. Looking like they're playing this instead of Ursula Vanessa. Personally, I like Ursula Vanessa a little bit more. I think the 4 willpower works better with cards like Rapunzel as opposed to having the extra resist +1. But if you're just trying to keep questing over and over again with these characters, maybe you want to try Troubadour instead. We got to talk about the addition of Miss Bianca in this deck. This is a 6 cost character, 5 strength, 5 willpower that says you can pay 2 less to play this character if you have an ally on the board. And we have plenty of allies in this deck. We have 4 copies of Daisy, Smee. We also have 3 of the Penny like we were just talking about. Troubadour is also an ally. Maybe that's why you're playing Troubadour instead of Ursula Vanessa, because of it's an ally type, so it helps you curve into this Bianca because you can go turn 1 Daisy, turn 2 Smee, turn 3 Aurora, and then turn 4 Bianca, right? Or even turn 4 Ariel into turn 4 Bianca. So you're playing cards early, you're setting up your singers, and now all of a sudden you have a 6 cost character on board on turn 4. Bianca's going to be able to sing all the songs in your deck also. Whole New World, Finding My Platinum, Along Came Zeus, Criminal Mind, all of these can be sung by Bianca the moment you play this character, which is very strong. I personally like having a really big singer. A 5/5 status singer is kind of overpowered in my opinion that you can play on turn 4. It's a very safe way in my opinion to basically assure that you can maybe set up your Whole New World, or even something like I Find My Platinum, which is a song that says banish all items. So if you're running into a lot of items in your local meta, maybe consider playing Find My Platinum in your steel decks. This is a singable 4 cost song, and it'll banish everything on the board that's an item from Workshop, Popsicle. So if you see all those Sapphire steel decks setting up Aerial Treasure Collector, Find My Platinum might be the way to slow the game down. Yes, they can grab the items back from the discard pile like we were talking about with Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, but they're going to waste their whole turn trying to grab back their items back. So it can slow the game down for you in your favor, especially if you're questing for 2 with your Daisies, with your Auroras, and your Benjas. And by the way, I like Benja a lot in this deck. I think Benja's coming back into the meta. Every time I talk about Benja, my friends are always like, oh, Benja sucks because they're just going to grab the items back from the discard. But that's fine. That is totally fine if you want to waste your whole turn as a Sapphire player grabbing back items and setting up your items again, because Amber Steel decks, they just going to keep questing for 2 over and over again. They're going to put you on a clock. Here's a really spicy list from this 40+ player tournament. It's a Green Steel Pirate Location deck piloted by Lance. Shout out you for getting top 8 at this tournament. I haven't seen a Green Steel Pirate deck in a minute, and I like that they're playing the Daisy Duck Pirate Captain because this is an enchanted rare, and maybe it'll make my enchanted rares go up in price. But pretty cool deck. I like where they're going with this. It's looking like the early game strategy is to set up some pressure with Calhoun or Captain the Hook maybe, so you can stop your opponent from questing willy-nilly, but you have some early game pressure if you're going first too, because you can start playing Smee on turn 2 to quest for 2. We also have Donald Duck First Mate. He can quest for 3 if you have a captain character in play, and if you have a captain character in play and Captain Hook is a captain, John Silver is a captain, you're not playing Gantu, but Gantu is a captain. There's a lot of captain synergy in this deck list right here. We have the new Uninkable Smee, that's also a captain. This character says when you play an action that isn't a song, you may ready chosen pirate character. So you can potentially start questing multiple times with your pirate characters, right? You can set up this Smee, then next turn start using stuff like Fire the Cannons or Smash to re-ready your Donald Duck First Mate, your Daisy Duck even, start questing for 3, maybe even 6 in one turn. If you don't know what this Daisy Duck does, it says whenever one of your pirate characters quests while at a location, you may draw a card. And we're playing a variety of locations. 4 copies of Nottingham, 4 copies of Seven Doors Mine, 4 copies of Fang. An Emerald location that costs 4, has a move cost of 2 and 6 willpower. Any character that's here is going to have ward and evasive as well. There's even 2 copies of Treasure Mountain, another enchanted rare that doesn't see a lot of play. This is a 5 cost uninkable location that has a move cost of 2 but has 9 willpower. This location will give you 2 lore at the beginning of your turn every turn as it survives, and it has an ability that says at the start of your turn, deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have here. So we don't have a lot of ways to move our characters to a location. location. I feel like the locations are really just there to generate passive lore or get your opponent to turn their character sideways and avoid your characters. I think the problem with some of the locations in Lorcana is that they have a really hefty move cost. So in a deck like this, you probably don't want to use your ink moving characters to location. You probably want to just keep playing more and more characters like John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker, or maybe even your Shift Pete Space Pirate, because on turn 3, you can play Pete Games Referee, stop your opponent from playing actions, and then you can shift onto that Pete with your Space Pirate, stop your opponent from singing songs, and give all your pirates resist +1. Doesn't look like you have a lot of draw power in this deck outside of Dog, Daisy, and Beast, so maybe those are going to be some crucial cards to have in your inventory if you want to play decks like this, because it's looking like the draw engine for Lorcana is starting to become very limited to basically very few cards, so you're going to want to add them to most of your strategies. But I like this. I like how creative this deck is. Green Steel, I think, is a deck you should not sleep on. I don't know about Green Steel pirate locations, but this is something that I want to try as well. There's a lot of different characters in here that make the deck very consistent nowadays. I feel like people have been trying to make a pirate deck real for the last like 2 formats, and maybe Green Steel Pirate might finally be the way to do it. Battle Bear also had a tournament opening weekend. I love seeing their deck list. There's always some prominent players here like Artabax, who got 2nd place with Sapphire Steel. You know, this says something, because as far as I've known, as long as I've seen Artabax play this game, he's always been playing green, purple, emerald, amethyst. And now to see him switch up to blue steel, oh my gosh, it hurts. It hurts my feels. It makes me worried that we are heading into a tier 1 format. But hey, Artabax is a great player. You know, pretty much no matter what deck you give him, he'll probably be able to do good in a tournament. Very nice to see. I like the creativity here. It looks kind of like the Kiwi aggro list we were just looking at, but this list is not playing any Docs. We're not playing any Alice's either, and we're playing that Tamatoa package still. We're playing 4 Fortisphere, 4 Popsicle, Flavor Sham, and 3 copies of Tamatoa, happy as a clam. I like that you can play blue steel as a control deck. You know, you can play it as a lucky dime deck, and you can play it as an aggro deck. As you can see here, you have a lot of 2 questers, Smee, Benja, Lawrence, Cogsworth even quest for 2. And like we were just saying, Cogsworth might make or break that mirror match for you. But I really want to talk about McDuck Manor. We're seeing a lot of people play McDuck Manor in this meta. So if you're playing cards like Cusco, Hideaway, maybe even prepare yourself and start playing stuff like Maui if you're playing Ruby cards, because McDuck Manor is looking like it's going to be very popular this format. I also been seeing a lot of people cut Grandma Tala from their Sapphire Steel decks and replace it with the new Scrooge McDuck. I like Grandma Tala in a deck like this because you're not very like item heavy. You're not trying to search for Lucky Dime or Workshop or anything like that. And on turn 3 or 4, you want to be able to play a character that will probably stay on the board and keep questing for you. Grandma Tala has some decent stats of 3/3, and it's a +1. When you play the character, you'll add another card from the deck to your hand, which is really nice. And I think that's all you really want to do in like a tempo-based deck here. There's no ramp. There's no ramp in this Sapphire Steel deck. That's what I like. We're building different strategies on how to play the color pairings. Every time you see Sapphire, you think, oh, they're gonna be ramping and whatnot. These Sapphire Steel decks we're seeing though, 0 ramp. Yep, even the first place list is playing no ramp cards. It's just characters on curve is what you want to do, and 1 copy of Gontu, a 5-cost character that will quest for 4. Love to see that. Shout out Pew85 for getting first place at this event. But yeah, at this event, first and second place were both Sapphire Steel. In top 4, we have Roofy NG with an Amethyst Steel deck. This is something I'm a little more partial to. I love the way this list looks. We're playing a variety of 1-cost characters to start that early game pressure against these slower Sapphire decks. You maybe want to open up Magic Broom, Turnabout. We also have Snake and Smee to ensure that we have some 3 strength, 3 willpower characters by turn 2 in case our opponent starts playing Bell, Apprentice, Inventor. We want to be able to contest that Bell with our characters as well. The new Giant Cobra, this Serpent is going to make a big difference in the meta for Amethyst Steel players. As a Amethyst Steel enjoyer, I think this card's overpowered. 3 cost, 4 strength, 4 willpower. It has Vanish, you know, but it's fine. It's fine. There's not too many cards in the card pool that can really get rid of this card effectively. You know, your opponent's going to have to use a Storm Rage on or Fire the Cannons anyway to make sure they get rid of this Giant Cobra before it starts getting a lot of value. But before then, you can discard a card on play to gain 2 lore. This is going to be extremely powerful in a deck where you're playing 4 goats and White Rose at 3 as well. You're just having a bunch of lore burst. You're adding more and more lore burst to the Amethyst color package, which I think is really strong. And this lets you clear out some uninkable cards in your hand that you might not want. Oftentimes, you have more than 1 dock in your hand and you just can't play the docks because you're going to end up discarding something, so you have to play it and not use the ability. But now you can play Giant Cobra before. discard one of the docks and then play your other dock so you can draw 2, or you can even discard something like Rabbit, because sometimes Rabbit gets in the way, right? No Genies in this list, which I'm surprised to see. I personally enjoy Genie in this kind of aggressive style list, but we're playing Rabbit instead. 3 copies of Crab, 4 Strength of a Raging Fire, 3 copies of Zeus. Zeus is extremely important. You need to be able to have outs to Maui Half Shark, Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, Scrooge McDuck even, to make sure that your opponent does not run away with the game with those powerful characters. And Library, still the best location in Amethyst right now. This card is going to generate you 1 lore at the start of your turn every turn, but you can use it in combination with your Chernobog followers, your Magic Brooms, to let you draw more than once off of their abilities, or you can start moving all your characters there. So in case you're playing against a Ruby Sapphire deck and you fear that they're going to play a big Sisu on you or a Be Prepared, you can set up a play where you go Library, move your characters into the library and quest. And now if your opponent does not have a way to remove the library, anytime they clear your board, you're going to start drawing cards, which just makes this deck, in my opinion, one of the best decks of the format. So I would not sleep on Amethyst Steel. I think if I had to pick like top 5 decks or color pairings anyways, it's going to be Purple Steel, Blue Steel, Red Blue, and the last 2 we're not sure yet, but Purple Steel is definitely up there in my opinion for like a #1 meta contender. And for my Purple Red enjoyers, which is also me, I love Ruby Amethyst, so I'm glad to see it in top 8 of this 50+ player tournament. Shout out Leica S for making it this far with the Ruby Amethyst, keeping the red-purple dream alive. We're not playing Flynn Rider. No more Flynn Rider. I figured Flynn Rider wasn't going to make the cut this format anymore. It doesn't feel like you're able to resolve Flynn Rider effectively now that your opponent can play Bell Apprentice Inventor on turn 1, take 3 strength, 3 willpower character. So more than likely your Flynn Rider is not going to resolve, and they're probably playing that in Sapphire Steel, so they might have a Storm Rage on or Strength of a Raging Fire to really make sure your Flynn Rider doesn't resolve anymore. But instead of Flynn, we're playing some new 2-cost characters, some Cusco the Wanted Llama, Scared Cusco. Now this card lets you draw a card when it's banished, very strong against fellow the opposing red decks. This will let you just quest freely, basically, which is very nice in a deck like Ruby Amethyst because you have a lot of ways to burst lore. We're also playing Raja as a 2-cost character. Pretty good. I like this character. Doesn't necessarily solve the problems against like Amber Steel or Sapphire Steel because Raja has Vanish. So the moment your opponent uses Storm Rage on or something, this Raja's gonna go away. But if your opponent opens up with Bell Apprentice Inventor and you play Raja and they don't have a song to sing on your Raja, you're gonna contest that character immediately, meaning you're gonna that opponent cannot keep questing with Bell willy-nilly because you're just gonna get a free trade there, which is very strong. Some more new cards in this deck, like the Queen Jealous Beauty, 4-cost character that when you exert, you can choose 3 cards in the opponent's discard pile and put them to the bottom of the deck. And if you put a princess, you gain 4 lore instead of 3 lore. This is some lore burst for you. You can generate some free lore. If you're at 17, you play this and your opponent has to out it, or you might win the game. But personally, my favorite part about this is that you were in a meta where the our opponents are constantly going through their discard pile to grab back items. Maybe they're going to grab back Lilos to play them again or something. And this Queen will disrupt that. This Queen will shuffle in items into the discard pile back into the deck. So if your opponent is relying on something like Tamatoa Happy as a Clam to grab back their draw engine, your Queen can stop that. Some songs in the deck we haven't seen in a cool minute. We have 1 copy of Teeth and Ambitions, which will deal 2 damage to your character and another opposing character. This is pretty good to stop Oswald. If you're afraid of Oswald in the meta, or you see a lot of Oswald at your local meta, maybe consider playing Teeth and Ambitions in Ruby Amethyst. We also have Hades. This new Hades is a dual ink Ruby Amethyst character. Kind of has a Teeth and Ambitions ability. When you play it, you deal 2 damage to one of your characters, and then you can banish a character on the opposing side of the board with 3 cost or less. Not too shabby. There's not that many characters you can really banish with this that are really powerful. You can't banish Flavorsham with this, which is probably what you want to be doing, but you can get rid of some cool stuff like Oswald or the Bell Apprentice or Smees. Stuff like Smee, Lawrence, any 3-cost character really that is problematic for Ruby M is going to lose to Hades, but it's such a big cost. It's a 6-cost uninkable character, so you're not going to be able to play this until at least like turn 5 or 6. 3 copies of Library and 2 copies of Beat King Undisputed, which is very powerful. This is a song that says each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. So it's Lady Tremaine without the body, and I think this is really strong, especially right now where a lot of Sapphire players, they're being kind of greedy and they're just trying to ramp as fast as possible into Tamatoa Happy as a Clam. And if that's their only character on board, you can play this on turn 4 and they have to send it to the discard pile. If I had one opinion on this deck, it would be to add a 4th Be Prepared somehow, because I think Be Prepared is just broken. Next up, we have an updated version of the Diggy Hole deck. This took first place at a 17-player tournament. Shout out you, Philip Ruffel, for getting first place with Amber Steel. The Amber Steel Diggy Hole. This This is a deck that was really popular last format. I like this deck a lot. It's a little bit more aggressive than some of the traditional Amber Steel Song decks. We're not playing Whole New World. We're not playing Aerial, so there's no way you can play Aerial and miss. So that's really nice. But we're playing some new cards like Bolt the Headstrong Dog, a 2-cost character, 1 strength, 3 willpower that says when you quest, you can draw and discard a card. Very nice if you need to discard some undesirable uninkables in your hand, like multiple docks or something like Calhoun if it's stuck in your hand. We have 2 copies of Penny as a 2-cost character that can quest for 2. We'll also give resist, like we were talking about, to some other characters. This is really nice. I think Penny's actually a sleeper card. The more and more I see Penny in these Amber Steel lists, the more I think, wow, this card's actually pretty good. Being able to give stuff resist like Daisy, Lawrence, these like really heavy willpower characters that quest for 2, it's going to add a lot of pressure in the early game for the opposing opponent. We also have Bolt, the new Super Dog Shift character, an Amber Steel Dual Ink character, 5 cost, 3 strength, 5 willpower that says whenever you ready this character, you may gain 1 lore for each other undamaged character in play. And it has an extra ability that just simply says exert banish chosen illusion character. So against an Amethyst Steel matchup, if I start playing Raja or Cobra, a Giant Serpent, then this Bolt is just going to be an immediate out to that card. But this Bolt is pretty good. Being able to have some extra lore burst based off of your undamaged characters seems like a pretty decent ability, especially when you can heal your characters with Rapunzel. So I like that you can shift this on turn 3. You can start singing some songs, and then at the start of your turn, you're going to be able to gain some extra lore if your Bolt survives. I say at the beginning of the turn because it's whenever this character is readied, and that's usually when you ready your characters, but you can use this in combination as well with cards like Sven, which will ready your characters manually off of that ability. So we don't see that in this deck, but maybe that's something you can consider adding to the deck as well. 4 copies of Dwarves Mine, a location that deals damage and gains lore for you. I like Dwarves Mine a lot this format. Don't sleep on Diggy Hole. In top 8 of this tournament, we have a yellow-green discard deck. Shout out Elias for his discard party deck right here. I like this deck list. No new cards. We're not seeing a single Archasia's Island card in this deck list. So in my opinion, this looks a lot like the Diego Saz deck that won the DLC in Toronto not that long ago. So hey guys, if you want to try an anti-steel and anti-sapphire strategy, maybe Lemon Lime discard might be the way, because I think this is still a very strong deck. People really won't see this coming in your meta. I think a lot of people are super heavily reliant on what they see on the internet. So a lot of people are going to be copying the Sapphire Steel Oswald deck, or the Sapphire Ruby decks. And sometimes these discard strategies just have a very good matchup if they don't open up what they need to open up. And you can stop their strategies with cards like Bare Necessities, which is going to let you look at the opponent's hand. You can snipe away their Fishbone Quills, their ramp, and slow them down. You could even potentially hit them with a You Have Forgotten Me and discard their entire hand while you have Prince John set up, which lets you just draw more cards. Very strong deck indeed. This deck is kind of hard to pilot, but I do think that this is going to make some waves this coming meta. In third place of this tournament, we have a Amethyst Steel location kind of deck. Not really location, it's just playing 4 copies of Dwarves Mine, but you can protect that Dwarves Mine with your John Silver, the Ship's Cook. Very nice. This will stop your opponent from challenging your locations or even challenging your characters. But we have a lot more lore burst in this deck than what we've seen in some other Amethyst Steel decks. Normally we see Goats, White Rose, and the new Giant Cobra, which will let you all generate free lore on play, but this list is playing 2 copies of Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, some extra way to gain 2 lore simply on play, and 4 copies of Bosses on a Roll. This would generate you 1 lore while looking at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can rearrange them in any order you want. So if you're like at 15 lore already, you play Bosses on a Roll, gets you to 16 lore. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you see some Goats, some White Roses, or some Giant Cobras, you can arrange them in the order so that when you draw, you're just going to be top decking your lore after lore back to back. So that's pretty nice. I'm telling you guys, I think Amethyst Steel is very strong this meta. We also have 3 copies of Happy in this list. Not something I normally see in Amethyst Steel, but with the addition of 7 Doors Mine in this, I can understand why you want to have a 1-cost character that can potentially help you deal 2 damage to the game state. Happy also has Evasive on your turn, but in this current meta, I don't think that's really relevant to have a 2-strength evasive character. There's not that many evasive characters running around right now. Genie was the biggest one, or Maui Half Shark, and neither of those are going to lose out to this Happy. And there's no Crab in this deck either, so it's not like you can bump up this Happy to clear to make some good trades. Personally, I think this is just here for the Dwarves Mine, and I don't think it's necessary, in my opinion. Like, I think you can play Dwarves Mine without needing Happy, because you can always trigger it with Dock instead. And there's some other great one-cost characters you can play in this deck. But if you just want to be gaining lore, and you just want to make sure that you have triggers for your Dwarves Mine, consider playing Happy in your deck. Next up, we have a Sapphire Steel first place list, piloted by Braden. Shout out Braden, by the way, is the homie. Hosted by the Encounter, a 1500 pre-release tournament. So this is the Sapphire Steel list that a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards. We see 4 copies of Oswald in this deck. And this card says, during your turn, whenever you ink, you're able to look at the top card of your deck. If it's an item, play it for free. So this is not once per turn. So you can combine this with Tipo, combine this with Fishbone Quill, which will let you ink multiple times per turn, and that'll let you trigger Oswald multiple times per turn. And we're playing a lot of items: 3 Lucky Dime, 2 Marisa's Workshop, 1 Great Stone Dragon, 4 Fishbone, 4 Popsicle, 4 Fortisphere, and 1 copy of Shield of Arendelle. This is a 1-cost item, a steel item, inkable, that says banishes item, chosen character gains resist +1 until the start of your turn. Not too bad. It's an item you can banish on your own to give resist to a character. Maybe you could even give resist to Oswald so that he does not lose out to something like Tinkerbell or like a 1 damage ping, right? And then later on in the game, you could just grab it back with Tamatoa in case you don't have any other items in your discard. That's always going to be there for you if you triggered it. Really, you want to play a variety of items though, because we're playing 3 copies of Scrooge McDuck, the Resourceful Miser. Like I've been saying, a lot of people are not playing Grandma Tala in Sapphire anymore. It's looking like we're playing Scrooge instead. A 4-cost, 4 strength, 4 willpower is really good in Lorcana, and this has a really high potential of generating you a +1. This might as well be Grandma already, because Grandma, when you look at the top 2 cards, you're going to add one no matter what. In this deck, like, the odds of you missing from the amount of items you're playing is really low. It can happen. Obviously, you can play Scrooge and you don't see an item. You'll always whiff if you have to, if it happens, but it'll happen. You can whiff, there's a world where you play Scrooge and you see no items, and it could happen to anybody. But the odds are definitely in your favor. So this is the deck. This is like the deck that everyone's afraid of, right? On turn 1, you go Popsicle into Bell. Turn 2, you're able to start singing Storm Rage on, Strength of a Raging Fire. You can ramp with Tipo. Then turn 3, you could be at 4 ink already. We're not even playing many 3-cost characters. It's only 4 copies of Pete, and the rest of the 3-cost cards are going to be items. So if you're already ramping, you can go straight into Tamatoa and Scrooge McDuck. And if you ramp fast enough, you go straight into the Tamatoa. And if you ramp fast enough, you could even finish the game really early with Tamatoa So Shiny. No copies of Aerial Treasure Collector. It seems kind of unnecessary because you're just playing 3 Lucky Diamond, 4 Tamatoa. That might be all you need to really secure the game. Second place from this tournament was an Amber Steel deck list. This looks a lot like the Diggy Hole deck we were just looking at, but we're not seeing any copies of Dwarves Mine, no copies of Happy. Let's see, like I was saying, seems kind of unnecessary. Instead, we're playing some cards like Benja, which will let you remove items on the board. Very nice, very strong in Amber Steel. I'm telling you guys, everyone keeps saying Benja's not good because they just grab the items back from the discard. That's fine. You want them to waste their whole turn grabbing stuff and setting their items back, because you're going to keep questing with your Piglets, with your Lawrences, maybe even with your Tianas. Tiana, a legendary Tiana, 3-cost, uninkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower, that says whenever a character of yours is challenged while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 strength unless that player pays 3 ink. This is a very strong card. More than likely, your opponent is not going to be able to afford to pay that whole 3 ink just to be able to challenge your character. So kind of has like a little bit of an aggro strategy built into this, right? And in case you really want to protect this Tiana, on turn 4, you can play Pluto Guard Dog, which is going to land on the board with 5 strength and 5 willpower as a bodyguard character. Of course, Ruby Sapphire making its way into top 8 of this tournament as well. Sapphire still being one of the best colors in the meta. You're going to see a variety of Sapphire decks. I do want to mention this deck is playing 1 copy of Hideaway. I'm telling you, if you're playing Sapphire, you probably want to add at least 1 copy of Hideaway or Cusco. And this list is playing the Maui Half Shark. So this is kind of more how we've been seeing Sapphire Ruby run in the last since last format, Maui Half Shark and no Lucky Dime, to be able to just generate you free lore for every action you play. But now we have some extra heavy hitter cards like Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam, to grab back your items. Once again, no Lucky Dime seems unnecessary, and there's no big Tamatoa in this list. So it doesn't look like this Ruby Sapphire list had Tamatoa so shiny. Maybe they didn't feel it was necessary, but shout out Stefan for getting top 8 with your red-blue deck. I like the triple Vitalisphere here too. You know, you got to make sure you have outs to some scary cards like McDuck Manor. The Vitalisphere plus Maui Half Strike is going to clear McDuck Manor in one swing, or Vitalisphere plus Maui will help you clear a library in one swing. This list looks a lot like Ruby Sapphire list that were being played last format, which is pretty cool, mainly because if you're going into a tournament blind and you start seeing some of these cards get inked, you're going to pretty much know the list your opponent's playing outside of maybe how many Tamatoa Happy as a Clams they have in their deck, or if they're playing stuff like Bell. But it doesn't look like Ruby Sapphire is the deck to take advantage of Bell the Apprentice Inventor. I'm sure you can. I'm sure there is other lists. In fact, there is other lists that are doing it. But for the most part, I'm seeing a lot of Ruby Sapphire players not use the new Bell in their deck. But here's a list that really takes advantage of Bell Apprentice Inventor. This is a Ruby Sapphire list from the Southside Gaming tournament. Shout out Jonathan Williams, aka Dragon John Z, probably one of the best Lorcana players ever right now. Go check out his channel. I'll leave the description in the link below. But I like this list. I like what he was doing, being able to play Bell on turn 1 and possibly shift into this 9-cost Bell by turn 4 is actually insane. So this 9-cost Bell is a shift 7, but it says you can pay 1 less to shift this character per every item you have in your discard pile. So you can start using stuff like Unconventional Tool, Popsicles, Vitalispheres to just put cards into your discard pile, so you can shift your Bell Apprentice Inventor into this new Bell, the mechanical extraordinaire. She's in a quest for 3, so having a 3 quester with 7 strength and 7 willpower as early as turns 4 to 5 is just really overpowered, because she can also sing Be Prepared or Let It Go if you really need her to. And if that wasn't strong enough, if I wasn't already selling you on this Bell, she has a second ability that says when this character quests, you may She has a second ability that says when this character quests, you may put up to 3 item cards from your discard to the bottom of your deck. Then you gain 1 lore for each one. That is really strong. This character has multiple abilities, multiple good abilities. So being able to utilize that, you're gonna quest for 3 and potentially generate 3 extra lore. So that's like questing for 6. Yeah, characters with multiple abilities, man. Sometimes they're a little too good in this game. It can be a little rough though, because you only have 1 shift Bell target for this deck. So if you don't have this Bell Apprentice Inventor on board, you're more than likely gonna be inking the Bell Mechanical Extraordinaire. But if you can get this lineup going first, going second, you're going to have a huge advantage against the opponent. We got Sapphire Coil to abuse our Sisu empowered siblings. We have 2 copies of Be Prepared to make sure we can wipe the board without using character effects. 4 copies of Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, because probably one of the best cards in the game right now. And 2 copies of Scrooge McDuck. Like we were saying, no grandma in this deck. Looking like Scrooge McDuck going to be the way you want to go about it, especially if you're playing Lucky Dime, Maurice's Workshop, and 4 copies of Fishbone Quill. Wow, haven't seen Fishbone Quill be used in a cool minute. To me, it was looking like a lot of the Ruby Sapphire players were like, nope, no more Fishbone Quill. We're heavily relying on Tipo now, or Sail the Azurite Sea. But this list is not playing Tipo. Instead, we're opting to play Fishbone Quill instead. But I think it's because we're aiming for some more item synergy here, because we have the Bell, we have Tamatoas and Scrooges. So maybe you might want to consider playing Fishbone Quill if you're aiming for a strategy like this, especially if you got Maurice's Workshop. We got to talk about Maurice's Workshop, man. This is a character. This is an item from set 1, if I'm not mistaken. A 3-cost uninkable. It says whenever you play an item, you can pay 1 more ink to draw a card. So now your Popsicles will draw you an extra card if you pay that extra ink, which is really strong to set up for free. There's a world where you quest with this Tamatoa Happy as a Clam and you play a free Maurice's Workshop. So now every time you play an item for the rest of the game, you just start drawing extra cards. There's a lot of good draw power in Sapphire, by the way, and it almost feels like they have like the best draw power. We need to start giving draw power to other colors, by the way, Ravensburger. I want to see some draw power for red steel, right? Like, why is Sapphire getting all the crazy draw power? Next up, I want to go over this top 8 list by Paul Carpanella, also from the Southside Gaming tournament. This is a yellow-green aggro deck, not a yellow-green discard. This is a all-character deck. We're not playing a single action or a single song in this. It's looking like, and we're not even playing Mufasa. I'm so used to seeing Mufasa in these full character decks. Very interesting. Really cool to see. We have a variety of 1-cost characters like Little John, Nala, Merryweather, Lady, and Daisy Duck. Wow, a lot of 1-cost characters. A lot of them can quest for 2 as well, because Lady will let you quest for 2 if you can play Tramp on turn 2. It'll let you quest for 2 no matter what if you have a tramp on board, because we're also playing the 7 cost tramp, but that's still pretty good in my opinion, because there's not a lot of 2 lore questers in this game, in the early game anyways, that have abilities like that. You could probably play Merfolk instead, but Merfolk not having any strength is kind of a bummer, and Merfolk only has 1 willpower. But yeah, some of the new cards that just came out on Archasia's Island make this aggro strategy very consistent. The new Tramp Enterprising Dog says when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 strength for each other character you have in play. So kind of like a Megara or even like a Cricky, there's a world where you need to make some good trades and you can play this tramp and catch your opponent off guard. But what's really cool is that if you have a character named Lady in play, you can pay 1 less to play this tramp. And let's talk about the 7 cost tramp. Now, for each character you have in play, you pay 1 less to play this character. So that's why you're playing so many 1 cost characters. On turn 1, you can play Daisy. On turn 2, you can play Little John plus Nala. Now you got 3 characters. On turn 3, this is only going to cost 4. So by turn 3 or 4, you can probably start playing this tramp really early on. And Tramp says when you play this character, you can draw a card for each character you have in play, then discard cards, which is really nice for stuff like Chernabog. If you're only having characters in your deck, you're always going to be discarding characters, so that means the more characters you have in your discard pile, the earlier you can play Chernabog right here. Chernabog says you pay 1 less for each character you have in your discard to play this character. 9 strength, 9 willpower, and it'll quest for 3. One of the biggest issues is that Chernabog says when you play the character, you got to shuffle all the characters back into your deck. So if you draw another Chernabog, you're not going to be able to use it for a while. But this new Tramp card lets you kind of filter that out a little bit quicker, which is nice. We also have the Lady, the Miss Park Avenue. I like this card a lot. It's a shift 3, so that's why you're also playing the 4 copies of the Lady Spaniel over here. So by turn 3, if your opponent is getting rid of your 1 cost characters really early on, you can shift this Lady, grab back 2 characters from your discard pile that cost 2 or less and add them back to your hand. Some heavy hitters that you can grab back are going to be like Daisy, Lilo the Escape Artist, maybe even something like Ursula to discard more songs from the opponent's hand. Really what you're trying to do is make sure you just have more and more resources that will let you keep questing for 2 or more. We also have Donald Duck Musketeer. This is going to give one of your characters a extra lore to quest with that turn, and Bodyguard. Prince Philip, a ward character with 3 strength that will more than likely always get you at least 2 lore. And we're also playing Dale in this deck. This is a 4 cost, 3 strength, 4 willpower character that says when you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck into the discard to give chosen character -3 strength until the start of your next turn. I really like this card. This reminds me of like Lightsworn in Yu-Gi-Oh! For anybody who knows what that is. You can play this character, you mill the top 3 cards of your deck. This is going to give you some fodder for your Chernabog, maybe even for your Lady Miss Park Avenue. But really what I like about it is that it's going to have somewhat of a Kita ability. You lower the opposing character's strength by 3, and that means that your high willpower characters are more than likely going to start surviving challenges, especially those that can quest for 2. I think in a world with nothing but Sapphire at your local meta, these aggro decks are gonna do pretty well. So if you want to combat these slower Sapphire decks that take up turns like Popsicle to set up stuff like Oswald or Maurice's Workshop, you can play decks like this, which are always gonna set up characters that quest for 1 or 2 and putting a lot of pressure on them. And last but not least, we have a Blurple deck that made it all the way into top 16 of this Southside Gaming tournament. This was like a 100+ player tournament, by the way, so there was a lot of competition. Shout out Mikey Hazed, FG Hazed over here for getting top 16 with Blurple. My fellow Blurple enjoyers, the Blurple dream is still alive, and if you ever wanted to play friends on the other side by turn 2, you can do that now with this list. We have 4 copies of Popsicle and 4 copies of Bell, Apprentice, Inventor, which is really cool because we don't really have any other ways to generate this item advantage. There's no Flavor Sham, no Tamatoa. We're just playing this 8-card package to make sure we can sing songs like Friends on the Other Side by turn 2. But really, I think what it also lets you do is just have a strong character on turn 1. A lot of Sapphire had this problem where on turns 1, 2, 3, you're spending a lot of time and ink trying to ramp. And your opponent's able to play a lot of characters within that time frame. But if you start playing Bell, the Apprentice Inventor by turn 1, it's going to stop your opponent from questing with those characters if they're trying to play a more aggressive strategy against you because you're Sapphire. Some other cool cards in this deck, we have the Bell Accomplished Mystic, which if you didn't know is also a Flutterborn character. So you can set up a play where you play this Bell on turn 1. Then by turn 3, you can shift into the Belt Accomplished Mystic. And that might be something your opponent isn't playing around, so you can move some damage counters around in your favor. We also have 4 copies of Elsa, the Fifth Spirit. Feel like we haven't been seeing this card see much play towards the end of the format, but maybe it does come back into play this format. Maybe you can use this to stop the opposing Oswald. You can exert their Oswald and swing into it. And since you're ramping in this deck, you're going to be able to get to this Elsa pretty quick. 3 copies of Hades for our removal, 1 copy of Elsa, the Spirit of Winter, and 1 copy of Madame Mim, Purple Dragon, which is something I don't really see played ever in the meta. But if you're playing Blurple, I want to hear your opinion on this list. If you're playing any of these color combinations, I want to hear your opinions down below. Once again, shout out to everybody who did well at these tournaments. Shout out to the tournament organizers and the players for sharing their deck lists. And congrats to everyone for doing so well at this tournament. And congrats to everyone for doing so well at these tournaments. And congrats to everyone for doing so well at these tournaments during the Archasia's Island opening weekend. Super excited to see where this meta heads. I don't think it's a tier 0 Sapphire Steel only meta, guys. I think there's a lot more to be explored, so be sure to stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more if you want to see more deck lists. If you made it this far, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe because it does support the channel. And if you guys have any deck lists you want to share from tournaments that you've been doing good at, join our Discord, drop the deck list down there because I love doing these videos. Hopefully there's some stuff here that you can take and apply to your decks, maybe at your locals this weekend. But until then, stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more.